The Seeker's Path. From hitchhiking in Hawaii to exploring some of the world's greatest mountain ranges. Join Selomon on a journey of self-discovery as he shares some of his greatest adventures. Follow along as he narrates true stories that are filled with mystery and excitement. Learn how you can find your own truth and gain insights and wisdom from his unique perspective. This is The Seeker's Path, where adventure awaits.
Previously on The Seeker's Path. I had a panic attack that inspired me to begin an epic adventure. There was an earthquake in Japan in early 2011 that shifted my world, leading me to have a Kundalini awakening. After that, I needed to go to Colorado, so I packed all my belongings and said bye to all my friends and lastly, my mother. And then I left my hometown in Coldwater, Michigan, unsure of when I would return. Episode 6. The First Bump in the Road. I was high on life when I left my hometown in Coldwater, Michigan. Not knowing what would happen next was an incredible feeling. This was the first time of my life that I was going on a trip across country all by myself. I was excited and nervous, but it was exhilarating. At least until I hit the first bump in the road. I had my hand stretched out of the window, feeling the sensation of wind sweep across my palms, when all of a sudden my battery light turned on. Just a few seconds later, my engine shut off. I started freaking out a little bit here, but I held it together enough to press down on the clutch, shift gears into neutral, and roll the car to a stop on the shoulder of a 2-lane road. Great. Now what the fudge am I going to do? I thought to myself. I got out of the car and opened the hood. There were some droplets of weird green liquid on the outside of the battery. I immediately started thinking that it must have exploded, and I was shit out of luck. I checked to make sure the liquid wasn't coming from the coolant tank or anywhere else besides the battery itself. And then I got out my tools. I grabbed a rag, wiped off the green liquid, and removed the battery. I took a deep breath and decided that the only thing that I could do now was to hitchhike into the nearest town and either get a new battery or by some miracle see if the battery I had could be fixed. I checked on my phone to make sure that there was a store around that sold batteries, and I found an AutoZone about 10 miles away from where I was. I grabbed my keys and made sure I had my wallet with me. I had to fight back the very uncomfortable feeling of putting myself out there to hitchhike a ride into town. I mean, before this moment, I had never hitchhiked before. I mean, sure, I picked up one before, but I've never been on the other side of a situation like this. And I didn't know if anyone would stop, or if they did, would they try to kidnap me? I mean, these were all fair questions to have before embarking on such an adventure as hitchhiking. But what helped me get over my discomfort was to focus on one small act at a time. So, for example, I focused on making sure I had my keys. Check. Make sure the doors are locked. Check. Make sure I have my wallet. Check. All right, now walk in front of the car on the shoulder for a little extra protection in case somebody tries to kill me. Check. All right, take a deep breath and stick out my thumb. Check. All right. This wasn't so bad, I began thinking after about a minute of holding my thumb up. and watching cars go by. I wonder how long this would take. I was out there for maybe 10 minutes before a really nice silver car pulled onto the shoulder. It looked like a brand new model. It was some kind of luxury compact car. I ran up to the passenger window and looked inside. The man in the driver's seat pressed a button to his left, and the passenger window rolled down. "Having some trouble?" the man asked. He was clean-shaven with short, slightly gelled, dark hair. There was a suit hanging up in the back seat. "Yeah," I responded. "I think my battery died. There's an AutoZone about 10 miles away that I would really like to get to." "Well, I can take you there, but you'd have to find your own way back," he replied. I thought for a short moment before agreeing and getting in, setting the battery down on the floor. I put the seatbelt on as he got back onto the road, heading towards the AutoZone. On the way there, I explained to him what I was doing, which he thought was interesting. I learned that he was a lawyer heading to a case. It took about 15 minutes to get to the store. In the parking lot was a cop car. "You should try and get a ride from that officer on your way back," he said. "Would he do that?" I asked. "Well, if he's on duty, he should. It's part of their job to be of service to the community." "Oh, well, I may do that then, thanks. Also, thank you for the ride," I said as I grabbed the battery and got out of the car. "Sure, no problem," he responded. "And good luck." "You too." So I went inside AutoZone and went up to the counter. "What can I do you for?" the cashier asked. I explained my situation with the battery and that I wanted to check to see if it could be fixed or if I would need a new one. So he took the battery behind the counter and hooked it up to a machine that was going to charge it back up. While he was hooking it up, another man, one with a very strange and eerie vibe, came up to me and asked what I needed. I told him I've already been helped. The creepy guy looked like he was a manager because, as the other workers were in red, short-sleeved AutoZone shirts, this guy was wearing a button-up and a tie. But he honestly looked pure evil. And I don't think that about people ever. But this is how I felt in that moment. It was about 15 minutes later when the guy I originally spoke to came back up to me and told me that the battery was charged, but that it was leaking slowly and it would need to be replaced as soon as possible. "All right, then I would like to buy a new battery," I told him. "Okay," he said. But before he could move from the counter, the evil man looked at us and said, "Wait a minute." The manager was tall, slim, with a bald head and very sharp, hostile eyes. He looked at me as if he wanted to induce some sort of damage upon me and my soul. And he said, "If it's your alternator, a new battery isn't going to matter." "All right, that's fine. I'll take my chances. I'd still like to buy a new battery," I replied. This only seemed to make him mad. "We're not going to give you a new battery if you have a bad alternator. Look, dude, I don't want any trouble. I just want a new battery in case it's not my alternator," I said as peacefully as I could. "I don't care what you want. We're not going to sell you a battery." Then he looked at the other guy behind the counter, the one I first talked to, and told him not to sell me a new battery and to give me my old one back. Poor guy looked so confused as to why his manager would act like this. But he went back and unplugged the old battery and brought it back to me. "Sorry about that," he said. I was so freaked out by how evil and nasty this manager was that I just wanted to be as far away from him as possible. So I took my battery and left. The cop car was still outside, and the officer was sitting on the hood eating a burger. "Hi," I said as I approached him. "Would you be able to give me a ride back to my car?" The officer looked like he was in his late 40s, early 50s, with short gray hair and a trimmed gray mustache. He finished what he was chewing and said, "How far are you going?" "About 10 miles away." "All right," he said. "Hop in." He finished eating and threw away his wrapper in a garbage that was close by. When I got back to my car, I put the battery back in, and to my extreme delight, it actually started. I drove to the closest truck stop where I parked for the night. I looked up some car shops that would be able to fix an alternator, since that evil guy really freaked me out about having a bad alternator. Unfortunately, everything was closed by this time, which was only 5 p.m. I decided to sleep in the car that night and wait until morning to head to a mechanic to fix what might be a bad alternator. Lucky for me, I packed plenty of warm blankets, including a Yodel blanket that was given to me by a friend. So fearing that my car was about to die and that I may have to hitchhike the rest of the way, I turned my car off and waited until it was dark so that I could fall asleep. What happened next put me back on the road with a feeling of freedom in my heart once again. So tune in next time to learn what happens. My nugget of wisdom for today. When you hit a bump in the road, it can be easy to freak out and assume the worst. But remember that everything happens for a reason, and more often than not, things turn out for the better. Even if you have to step outside your comfort zone, just take things one step at a time and trust that it will all work out. So thanks for tuning in here to The Seeker's Path, and until next time, this is Selomon, signing out.